All right, let's jump right into this explainer. Today, we're looking at a monumental corporate collapse, starting right at the absolute peak of Nokia's power. It's this crazy, perfect mix of drama, irony, and some massive takeaways for anyone building a business today. We're going to see how a single memo, a stubborn corporate culture, and one fatal meeting completely destroyed the absolute most dominant tech company of its era.
So to really understand this, we have to go back to 2007. Because the crucial point here is that in 2007, Nokia sold 1 out of every 2 phones on Earth. Just take a second to let that sink in. Half of the entire planet's mobile phone market belonged to one single company. At the time, their stock was actually worth more than Google's. Their CEO was gracing the cover of literally every major business magazine. They weren't just winning the game, They absolutely were the game.
But get this. Incredibly, just 5 years later, they were worth less than the cash sitting in their own bank account. That is a mind-bending drop. We're talking about a massive $700 billion mistake. And that's exactly what we're going to unpack today. Because how on earth does a company go from owning the world to just vanishing from the industry completely in half a decade? Let's break it down.
Section 1. Building the Nokia Empire. From rubber boots to global dominance.
Nokia wasn't always a tech giant. Actually, for over a century, they made paper, rubber boots, and even military equipment. But in the 1990s, they placed a massive bet on mobile phones, and it paid off huge. By 2007, they had reached this totally untouchable scale, capturing nearly 50% of the entire global mobile market. By 1998, they were already the world's largest mobile manufacturer, and less than a decade later, their phones were quite literally everywhere.
And a huge part of that success came from producing affordable, seemingly indestructible hardware. Just think about the number 126 million for a second. That's the amount of units they sold of just the iconic Nokia 3310 alone. That phone is legendary. People still joke today that a 3310 could survive a nuclear apocalypse. They were engineering these incredibly tough, beautiful devices, and honestly, they felt completely untouchable.
Section 2. The 2007 Apple blind spot. The day everything changed. All right, so on January 9th, 2007, a company that had never made a phone before stepped up and unveiled a device with no buttons, a full touchscreen, and an actual web browser. Obviously, that was the iPhone. Now, Nokia engineers reportedly bought one and tore it apart within days. And their conclusion? They fundamentally believed real phones needed physical keyboards. They argued that the battery life was way too short, a keyboardless design was totally impractical, and the price point was just way too high for the mass market.
And that completely dismissive attitude led straight to a sentiment which perfectly captures the fatal flaw of corporate hubris. They weren't worried. In the minds of Nokia executives, this shiny new Apple device was just an expensive toy for tech geeks. They simply weren't threatened by it at all. Why would they be when they were comfortably selling 450 million units a year, right?
But this created a massive, fatal disconnect. Because while Nokia stubbornly doubled down on perfecting physical hardware, making those beautiful, durable, flawlessly engineered phones, Apple, and very soon Google with Android, were successfully conditioning the whole world to buy digital experiences instead. App ecosystems, smooth touchscreens, continuous software updates. The global consumer wasn't buying a phone anymore. They were buying a portal to an experience.
Section 3. The burning platform collapse. A culture of fear and a delayed reaction.
Compounding this whole shifting market was Nokia's own operating system, Symbian. It was clunky, developers absolutely hated building apps for it, and customers found it deeply frustrating compared to the iPhone's incredibly slick interface. But worse still, insiders later revealed this really toxic internal culture of fear. Middle managers were actually terrified to deliver bad news up the chain, so massive, glaring problems were just hidden instead of fixed. Which brings us to 2011, when their new CEO, Stephen Elop, sent a desperate internal memo to the entire company. He announced a massive sweeping pivot, abandoning Symbian entirely to partner with Microsoft's Windows Phone.
When you track the timeline of this descent, it is agonizingly rapid. By the time they actually made that pivot in 2011, 4 full years after the iPhone launched, iOS and Android were already operating these unbeatable app ecosystems. Windows Phone simply never gained the traction it needed, and that delay leads directly to their absolute surrender in 2013. The scale of this financial collapse is absolutely staggering. At its peak, Nokia was worth over $250 billion. But in 2013, after watching their stock drop over 90%, they sold their legendary mobile phone division to Microsoft for just $7.2 billion. That is less than 3% of its peak value. And to add insult to injury, 2 years later, Microsoft wrote off almost that entire acquisition as a total loss. Nokia had completely vanished from the very industry it built.
Section 4. The Innovator's Dilemma. Extracting the core lesson.
So what does this all mean for us? Well, success creates blind spots. Listen, Nokia didn't fail because they ran out of money. They didn't lack talent, and they absolutely didn't lack incredible technology. They had all of those things in abundance. They failed because they were so spectacularly successful with their old model that they simply could not imagine a new one replacing it.
This is a textbook example of what business strategists call the innovator's dilemma. It's this dangerous psychological and structural trap where relying on your current, highly profitable cash cow actually prevents you from adapting to disruptive changes. It's the exact same dynamic that destroyed giants like Blockbuster when streaming arrived, BlackBerry when touchscreens hit, and Kodak when digital photography took over. The companies that survive long-term aren't necessarily the ones with the best products today.
They are the ones constantly asking themselves this question: what if everything we know is about to become irrelevant? I want to leave you with that provocative thought to challenge your own ventures. Always look at the data, read the shifts in the market, and never ever let today's success blind you to tomorrow's reality. Nokia had everything, and they lost it in less than a decade. Now, if you found this explainer valuable, make sure to stay tuned, because next time we are going to decode the exact same mistake that crushed a massive titan of the camera industry. You really won't want to miss that one.